I am playing 5-5, 1,000 cap. I'm trying to make $100 an hour. Is it possible?
Possible, yes. Plausible, it's hard, okay?
Let's rewind a second. That's me, Marc Goone, and I'm trying to make $100 an hour playing low stakes. I'm nearly 150 hours in and well on pace for my goal, but sometimes it seems I'm the only one on the planet who thinks this thing might just be plausible. In fact, I'm starting to feel like the first guy who ran a sub 4-minute mile, and then after that, everyone started running sub 4-minute miles. In this episode, I play 2 sessions at Hustler Casino and try to keep my hourly above the vaunted triple-digit mark. Can I stay on track to do the implausible? Let's find out.
Down bad, bounce back, boy, I'm different. Watch how I handle my business. Watch with the hands not ticking. Listen, that's that drum kick, boom, coming out of my system.
All right, guys, so jumping into the first session of the week at Hustler. Overview of the results so far. We've played about 145 and a half hours, up about 16.6K. Good for just under 115 an hour so far. So let's see if we can keep it going. First significant hand of the session, the hijack opens to $15. And like most players at this level, this guy's just splitting his opening sizes. I've seen him open to 30, 35, even 40 when he has very strong hands. So this player is on the tighter side, but the $15 open is not going to include the top of his range, at least that much we know. So we look down at ace jack of hearts in the big blind, and this hand is good enough to 3-bet with the clues we have about his opening size. So we go 75. He's going to call. We're heads up to a flop, which comes 10, 10, 8 with a couple of spades. I'm just checking my entire range out of position here. We check it. He quickly checks it back. Turn is now a jack, and they're front door spades and backdoor diamonds at this point. I think he's going to be pretty inelastic with hands like king, queen, or pocket nines here. So I do choose a bigger size. I go 125, and he puts in a quick call. River is now a 10 of hearts, and at this point, I think we just have to target hands like ace 8 suited that check back the flop, or maybe like a pocket nines type hand that check back the flop. And those hands are now full houses, of course, and I think we get a little bit of value there. So we go 250. He grumbles and thinks for a few seconds, finally puts in a call, and we show, and we actually end up chopping with queen jack of clubs here. So we were ahead the whole time, and then we end up chopping on this river, and just goes to show just how tight this player is here. Was tank calling with a jack here on the river. Next hand, we open to 25 and a low jack with queen 8 of spades. Only the cutoff calls, and he starts this hand about 450 effective before calling, so just about 430 behind here. Flop comes king jack 10 with a couple of spades, so we actually flop a combo draw here. I'm just going to be checking my entire range, single raise pot out of position, going to be putting in a massive check raise here if he does stab, but he checks it back. Turn is a 7 of diamonds, and normally on a blank turn after the flop goes check check on a relatively wet and dynamic board, I'm going to be checking again to go for the check raise, but since he only started 450 effective in this hand, I think just going big bet actually works a little bit better. He calls. River is now an offsuit 5, and at this point pot is 215. He's got just about 350 behind, and he's going to be hard pressed to call any hands that check back the flop. Then we can get a lot of the jack X to fold here, the 10X to fold, stuff like that. So I jam for 350 into 215, and he snap calls, and he has ace jack. So doesn't believe our line here, and maybe just actually going for the default, going for the check raise again on the turn would have been better. Probably would have been better. Can't be worse. So still trying to calibrate against all of the players in this pool, and this guy definitely more on the sticky side, obviously. So nice call from him, and he wins a nice little pot, and we lose. All right, so our image is kind of shot here. The straddle's on, so we're playing 5-5-10 just for this hand. We open to $40 in the low jack with queen jack off. Button calls, and we are heads up to a flop, which comes 9-8-5 here, rainbow. We check it over, and he goes 50. This is kind of an in-between size, especially when the board is drier. So we are going to call. Turn is a king of diamonds, and it goes check, check. Now the river is a 5. And at this point, I'm considering a couple different options. I'm considering going very, very big here to get hands like 9X or 8X or pocket 10s to fold, because what hand do they put us on when we check call the flop, when we're the pre-flop raiser? Well, they put us on ace king. So So I think we can get a lot to fold. But the problem is I do think he can have quite a few hands like 5-6, 5-4, 5-7, ace-5. I think he could just have a lot of 5x on this river, so I do think we run into a brick wall sometimes, and this player is on the stickier side, so we're not sure actually that he would even 100% fold a hand like 9x. So I decided just to go very, very small here, just to try to get like his ace highs to fold here, or maybe hands like pocket 6s or pocket 7s or something that's stabbed on this flop. So I go very small. I go 40 into 195, and he puts in the call, so we show with queen high, and he has pocket 4s. Probably should just be check raising this flop, knowing how wide this player is stabbing. When they stabs from medium size, he's just stabbing way too much, so I'm going to be check raising much more often on flops to apply pressure. And this player is quite sticky, even with just any showdown value on the river, so probably just need to go bigger here if I get to the river as played. I think against the population, I play this hand okay, but against a specific player, I think I kind of play this hand like crap. All right, next hand. So I am evolving and adjusting in real time as we continue this session. The straddle is on, and we open to $40 in the low jack. We're doing one round of straddle here, so the straddle's on. We open to $40 in the low jack with ace king, and the button, the player from the last hand who called us with pocket 4s, now calls. Flop comes king 5-3, and I'm just checking here because, as obviously shown in the last hand, this guy's just massively overstabbing, but he does check it back. Turn now is a 10 of clubs, so there are front door diamonds and backdoor clubs. So I'm actually going to get pretty tricky here and check again, because I think this guy's just going to monkey stab a ton here on this turn. So that's what happens. We check, he goes 80, and we know that this guy is sticky. We know that he doesn't like to fold. I don't think he's going to be folding a ton of draws here, so we are going to put in the check raise. We don't have to go too big. If we just go like 4x, 320, 325, pot's gonna be like 750, and he's only gonna have like a pot size bet back left on the river. Now he goes deep into the tank and starts talking.
How much more do you have? Because I know you're gonna put me all in next hand. So it's not about this one. I can call this one. Can you give me a count, please?
Yeah, 750 more.
1,000 total.
Well, I know you don't have a very good hand at this point.
Yeah, do something, please. I don't have a lot of time.
Wait a minute.
If I were you, I would fold.
No, I would do it too. If I were you.
No, if I'm saying if I were you.
No, I'm saying if I were you, I would fold too. All in.
Oh, snap call. Pocket pair. Ace king. Whoa.
So he just got it in with a naked flush draw. So feel pretty good actually about the way I played this hand as opposed to the last couple. Made some adjustments in real time. Noticed this guy was sticky. Noticed he was overstabbing, and just got the money in really, really good. Not much we can do about the results, but pretty happy overall with how I played this one. All right, next hand here, just ABC simple hand reading. Gets us some nice value in this hand. So we open to 25 here under the gun. The straddle was off. We just did one round. The small blind calls for heads up. Flop comes 10-6 deuce with a couple of spades. We've got 8-7 of spades, so we flop a combo draw here. He checks it over. We go $25, and he calls. Turn is now an 8 of diamonds. At this point, I think against a small blind cold calling range, we actually have showdown value. So I think a big mistake a lot of players make in live poker is turning draws with showdown value into a bluff. So we're actually going to check this back and use it as a bluff catcher. Now the river is an 8, so we have trips here on this river. And when he checks it over at this point, I do think if he missed a spade draw, a lot of times when the turn goes check, check, they just come out and bluff the river for half pot. So I think he has a ton of showdown value when he checks this river. So when recreational players check the river, they are generally checking to check call. So we are going to go for max value here, not just because I have trips, but because we think he has showdown value. We think he has a lot of hands like 10x or pocket 9s or pocket 7s that just aren't planning on folding when he checks this river, and the draws brick. So I go 150. I overbet here into 100. He snap calls, and we show our hand, and obviously we are good. All right, next hand here, double board PLO Bom Pot alert. All right, so we are six-handed, so pot is 150. We've got Jack 10, 9, 9, so a pretty good hand for a double board bomb pot. Board 1 comes Queen 8, 6. Board 2 comes queen 4 deuce, and it checks all the way around. Now the turn up top is a 9, so we make the nuts with jack 10, and we also have a set of 9s. So we've got a little bit of backup, and board 2 is a 4, pairing the board. So we've got nothing really going on the second board except a pair of 9s, which is never good. So it checks all the way around to us in the cutoff. Again, no one's shown any initiative. We would like to start putting in money here with the nuts and backup on one board and get people to fold out their equity on the other board if possible. So we go 100. Now the low jack is going to check raise to 450 here, and we are in kind of a tough spot because we could be up against a hand that is jack 10 that has something going on the other board. For example, if this guy has a hand like jack 10 4x, we are just in a really, really shit spot. So if I actually just had jack 10 here, I would probably be folding, but we do have a set of 9s to go along with it, so we kind of have a redraw on the top board if this guy is quartering us, like if he does have a hand like jack 10 4x. So the river now is a 5 up top and now a 10 below, and he jams all in. This is a really shit spot. He jams all in for about 700 effective. Going back, a little bit of hand reading on the turn. I do think players kind of play face up when they have kind of the vulnerable nuts on one board. So I do think if this guy had jack 10 up top, that he would just come out and pot it a lot himself on the turn, afraid that a bad card would come for him, afraid that the board would pair, afraid that it would run out a one-liner to a straight, whatever. So I think more than likely, because of the way he's played this hand, I think he's got a lockdown hand on board 2, maybe pocket 4s, pocket deuces, queen 4, makes a lot of sense, something like that. So because he didn't come out and lead on the turn, it just makes me think that it's more likely that he has a lockdown hand like a full house on board 2 than he does have a hand like jack 10. It's kind of a dubious read, but that's what I'm going off of. I put in the call, and I actually end up being right here, but he had us in pretty bad shape. So he was kind of free rolling us going to the river there, but we get a little bit lucky in that the top board doesn't pair, because I would never be folding pocket 9s if that top board paired, and we end up chopping the pot. Big pot alert. Hello. Next hand, and it is round 3 against the very sticky player who got us good when we got it in with ace king against his queen high flush draw, and the player who called us with pocket 4. So this guy is very, very sticky. Under the gun makes it 20, EP, and the cutoff called. We're in the small blind with 7-5 of clubs. This is a fold for me, maybe 97% of the time. All of the other players in this pot are very, very deep with us, including the under the gun opener, including the cutoff who called. Maybe I just had a feeling. And the flop comes 6-4-3 with 2 hearts. So we flop the nuts here. Checks all the way around to the cutoff who bets $60. And at this point, I am going to put in the check raise here. I raise to 260. Again, I think this size is just a little bit too small. I'm trying to play a 2-street game here. He started this hand off with just about 1,000. So maybe we should just go 350 here. I think that would be better. But anyway, we go 260. And now he jams all in for 1,025. So we are going to snap this off, obviously with the nuts. Board runs out 9 of spades, 5 of spades, and he shows pocket queens. So we got it in. He was basically drawing almost dead here, and we win a nice $2,000 pot. Next hand here, straddle is still on. We open blind on the button with 3 recreational players in the blinds. We go $40, and the straddle calls were heads up. We look down at 8-3 offsuit here, so another doozy that we opened on the button blind. Flop comes king 10-6 with a couple of spades. He checks it over. I'm just c-betting my entire range around half pot. I go $50, a little bit bigger than half pot, and he quickly calls. Turn is now an ace, and generally on these turns, I like to continue barreling when I have nothing going on, but there is one difference here in that this player only started off this hand about 300 or so effective. So by barreling on this turn, I'm just not going to be able to have enough behind on the river to apply enough pressure. So I elect to take a slightly different option here, and I check back on the turn. And I think if the player does have a strong hand like ace 10 or ace 6 or queen jack, he's just going to come out and bet the river himself. And if he does have a hand like 10x or king jack or something like that, he's going to check on the river, and we're going to be able to get a lot of folds and rep ace x credibly. The river is a 7, and when he checks, now the plan is just to get every hand weaker than an ace to fold here. And I think if I was trying to get a hand like king 9 suited or something to call, I'd have to go very, very small here. I'd probably have to go like 75 or 80 here on this river. So I go 130, just trying to get the king x and the 10x to fold, and then we start talking.
What do you have? Well, if you tell me what you have, I'll tell you whether to call or not.
Got 15.
You got 10s? Trip 10s? Oh, just a 10?
Yeah.
I have an ace. I thought you had a set of 10s. I was like, what are you?
You got no 15.
I had a flush draw.
Next hand, this is a fun one. EP limps. We ISO to 35 on the button with ace 10 of hearts. The small blind calls and the limper calls. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes jack 8-4 with a couple of hearts. So we flop the nut flush draw here. Checks over to us, and I go $40 here with the nut flush draw. Small blind snap calls next to act, and now EP calls as well. Turn is a 3 of clubs, so when it checks over to us again, I just don't think we have a ton of fold equity here. I think at least one of these players has a jack, if not the small blind, then the EP limper. So we're actually going to check this back and just try to realize, try to hit an ace, try to hit a heart, try to hit our hand. So we check it back. River is now a jack, and the small blind comes out and bets $50 here, and the EP player folds, gets out of the way. I think we've got enough showdown value just to call here. We beat worse flush draws. We beat 10-9. I think we've got a smidge of showdown value, but I actually think a cooler play is just actually to bluff raise here, because I do think when this player leads small, he just never has a jack in a million years. A jack would just get greedier and come out and bet bigger, and I do think we can get hands like 8x to fold that he's just monkey betting. So we put in the raise to 270 here, just going for the range fold. He thinks about it and folds just a few seconds later. Next hand here, under the gun limps, and the cutoff ISOs to 20. We've got ace jack here in the big blind, and I just don't think when the cutoff ISOs to this size over a limp that he has top of range. So I actually decide to put in a light 3 bet. We go $100 here. Now the EP limper gets out of the way, cutoff calls, heads up to a flop, which comes ace 9-5, and I'm just going to be checking my entire range out of position here. I check, he goes 120, which is a relatively big bet. We put in the call. Turn is now a 7 of hearts. We check, and thankfully for us, he checks it back. If he put in a big double barrel here, I'd be getting relatively nervous. Now the river is a 5. I do think if he had an ace with the board being so wet on the turn, that he would continue betting even if for a smaller size. So at this point, we're targeting pairs under the ace, pocket 10s or 9x. I come out and just make a very small bet here for 100 into 445, targeting those aforementioned weak hands. He puts in the call, we show, and we are good. All right, next hand here, table's playing very passive, not 3-betting a lot, just doing a lot of calling pre-flop. So we're gonna size up here. We go 30 from early position with king jack off. The low jack is going to call. Flop comes jack a3, checking my entire range here. So I check, and now the low jack goes 125 into 65. Not really sure what's going on here. Big bet on this flop. But I'm gonna call one time, see what he does on the turn. A lot of times he'll just shut down after putting in this huge bet like this, but this is really precarious already. So we call. Turn is now a 9 of hearts, bringing in a backdoor heart draw. We check it over. Now he goes small on this turn. He goes 115 after betting huge on the flop, and well, we're getting a good price. We've got top pair, so we put in the call. River is an 8, pairing the board. We check, and he snap moves all in for just about 400. At this point, there's just no bluffs. They under double and triple barrel. He took a huge size on the flop, and everything gets there, right? Queen 10 gets there. A hand like 9-10 would probably just check back on this river. This to me feels like a flopped set. They got a little bit nervous on the turn when a straight came in, and now it's just going for max value and getting greedy on the river. So maybe a case to be made. I'm not sure I can ever fold turn as played, but maybe a case to be made for just folding flop, LOL, when he goes 125 into 65. But either way, get away from this on the river, and we fold. Next hand, low jack opens to $60. That's right, it's a $60 open. There's no straddle on or anything. And we look down at pocket queens here in the small blind. and LoJack only started this hand about 450 effective. The big blind behind us only has about 500. So we just put in the money here against the LoJack's open range. I think we can be ahead of hands like jacks, 10s, or 9s that would do this, and in good shape against hands like ace, queen suited or something like that. So we put it in. LoJack calls. Flop comes king, jack, deuce. So we don't love to see that. Turn is an 8, and look at this. The river is a queen. So we flip over our queens and we are good against ace king, and we flopped it here. All right, next hand here, double board PLO Bom Pot. Not sure why that's my double board PLO Bom Pot voice, but it seems like a good double board PLO Bom Pot voice, you know. So 8 people in, so the pot is 200 here. We've got ace, queen, jack, 5 with a couple of diamonds. Board 1 comes jack, 4, deuce, so we flop top pair with a gut shot, and board 2 comes 6, 5, deuce with a couple of diamonds, so we flop the nut flush draw and top pair with a gut shot. Pretty good. So I'm checking my entire range from early position here, so that's what we do. Now an early position player pots it to 200 and the button calls. I think it's relatively close here, but I think when EP pots it into this many people, they are just going to have lockdown value on one of these boards. They could have 4 deuce, which means actually that they've got a straight on one board and 2 pair on the other. I just think they're going to have a very good hand. We're not going to have any fold equity here against EP's potting range, and obviously we are just crushed on at least one of these boards, but we do have outs to hit the nuts, of course, on board 2. So we're gonna call and kind of see what happens. Turn is an ace up top, so now we have top 2 pair and a 9 down below. We check. EP goes all in for 500. Now the button calls for less, about 420. And well, we've got top pair up top and the nut flush draw below. We're gonna put it in here, hoping that both of these guys have a hand like 4 deuce, or maybe one guy has 4 deuce and one guy has a set down below or something like that. Now the river is a 10 up top and a 7 below, so we brick our flush draw, and what's going to end up happening here is EP has jack, 9, 8, 7, so he just had a pair up top, and he turns actually the nuts on the second board with 7, 8, but now the button shows 10, 8, 4 deuce, so he had that 4 deuce that we talked about where he had 2 pair up top and the straight down below, but he's got 10, 8, so he actually rivers the nut straight down below, and our ace jack is good up top, so we are going to win half of this pot. So we're actually going to chop the tiny side pot here with EP, and then we're going to chop the main pot with the button who has the nut straight. So we end up chopping up essentially the EP player's money here with the button. All right, so session ended up okay, kind of salvaged it from how it started off. Ended up down about $450, which is pretty good for how we started that session. Played about 8 hours, and we are still on pace, just over $100 an hour now, and you know what they say.
If you're down money, you've got good cards.
That's what they say. There is something, since I've known you, every time you text me, I feel like I have to poop.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I've never been called a human laxative before, but here we are. You embrace the things you're good at, I guess.
I am playing 5-5, 1,000 cap. I'm trying to make $100 an hour. Is it possible?
Possible, yes. Plausible, it's hard, okay? I grew up in an era where money was free. 2003 to 2012-ish, it was doable. It was achievable back then. I think you're up for quite the challenge.
What do you think the betting line would be?
A man of your skill. Let me ask you this. How bored are you going to get in doing this?
Yeah, I don't know if bored, just more so angry with the inane table talk.
I think maybe like 2.5 to 1.
Okay,
You'd have
cool,
to be
I
the
think.
best 5-5 player in the world.
I am the best 5-5 player in the world right now.
That's conceivable, actually.
All right, jumping into session number 2 of the Week at Hustler. Look at this beautiful table, all purple. We're gonna mix it up and go to the purple boy table. EP limps, LoJack ISOs 225, hijack and button call. We're in the big blind with jack 9 of diamonds, so we are coming along here, and EP calls as well. So we're going 5 ways to a flop, which comes king, jack, 8, and this one checks around. Now the turn is a 3 of diamonds, so we've got middle pair with a a backdoor diamond draw. I think on the turn our hand is a little bit too thin to bet. If we did have a hand like a weak king X suited hand here, I'd probably just come out and bet, but we could still be behind hands like queen jack, ace jack, and the EP player can still have a king quite a lot himself. We've got showdown value. We check here. It checks all the way around to the hijack, who goes 25 into 125. We have a very easy call here. Heads up to a river, which is a 10. We check it over. Now he instantly goes $50. I do think if he improved on this river, he would at least think about his sizing. Usually when they go small on one street and then just exactly double the size on the next street, that is a clue. They don't necessarily love their hand. So we put in a call with second pair. He mucks his cards, and we start off the session with a nice win. Next hand here, under the gun and EP limp, low jack ISOs to 20. We're gonna make a lighter 3-bet with a 6 of clubs. We think if he had a very strong hand, he would just ISO to a bigger size. So we go 60, but now the under the gun and EP limpers are going to call, and the low jack razor is going to call. So not exactly what we want. We're going 4 ways to a flop, which comes 7, 5, 3 with a couple of hearts, checks all the way around to us. We're going to check this one back. Turn is now a 4. Under the gun comes out and bets 100 here, folds to us in the cutoff. And I do think, I'm not really sure what I was thinking in game here. I think probably just raising and putting in the money. He's only got about 230 behind. My thinking here was that if he is just taking a stab at this, let him take another stab at it on the river maybe. I'm not really sure. I think we should just put in the money, but we are going to call with the straight here. River is now a king of hearts, so the front door draw comes in, and now he jams, and this is a little bit concerning. Players generally here, I find, will slow down if they did have a hand like a set or 2 pair. So I don't think it's ever worse for value. And so when he jams all in here, I think we're either chopping with another 6 or we're losing to a hand like 8-6 or a flush. And so I would be calling 230 in my opinion here, just to chop a lot of the time. Not a huge fan of how I played it overall, but I do decide to fold here, just figuring on this river. This is under bluffed. He's not going to be doing this with worse for value. And so we have a bluff catcher, and when they're under bluffing, folding is more profitable than calling, but wish I would have just put the money in here on the turn, even if we would have lost to a rivered flush. We've got some characters at the table, so a nice little interlude here of table dialogue that I thought was funny.
You got on flop and you're gonna raise on flop. Why are you guys racing on flop? What hand?
He had the ace king.
Dude, if 2 more cards came, it would be.
It doesn't matter. He had the ace king.
Doesn't matter if you have an ace king.
Yes, you did. You showed me.
Are you like a novice or something? Dude, ace king doesn't mean shit.
Next hand here, if I could take back one hand this session, this would probably be it. So the low jack raises to $15. This is a player who is trying, not sure if he's a pro or just playing for profit, but first of all, LOL side, like going 3x in this, it just gives away, like, what are you doing when you raise to 3x in a game where no one is 3-betting and people are just calling with any 2, whatever. So he's obviously not a very strong pro, probably on the more conservative or nitty side. So we're gonna call in the big blind here with 10-5 of diamonds. Flop comes 10-6-4, 2 diamonds. So we actually flop top pair and a flush draw. We check, it checks through. Turn is now a 9. At this point, we're gonna go for some value. We go 50 here, just figuring that if one of these players has showdown value, they are not folding. We go 50 into 45. Now the low jack calls next to act. River is a 6, and I think we have a couple options on this river. We can either block targeting hands like 9x, or we can check on this river and let this guy bluff, but I'm just not sure he's going to have many bluffs here on this river when he checks back the flop and then calls the turn, and the turn doesn't really bring in a lot of draws. So I actually don't love checking here, but I decided to check for God knows what reason. And now he goes 125 into 195. This is just not a bluff. When players check back the flop, call the turn, and then decide to bet on the river when you check to them, when backdoor draws don't come in, this is one of the most under bluff lines in all of poker, because if they had a hand that wanted to bluff, they generally just start that bluff on the flop. And when the turn brings in a card that doesn't bring in a lot of backdoor draws and they call on the turn, well, they just don't have any bluffs getting to the river. So I don't know what was going through my head here. The fact that this guy opened to 15, he's going to be on the more conservative side. He's probably one of those GTO bots who thinks he understands GTO but doesn't actually understand GTO. Whatever. This guy's not bluffing here. I put in a call, and then he asked.
Not make the vlog.
Well, you're not gonna make the vlog.
This one here, this may just be my favorite hand of the entire session. It is my favorite hand of the entire session by far. Let's jump into it. Folds around to us on the button. We're just opening any 2 cards here. We raise to $25 without looking. The small blind calls. We are heads up to the flop. This has been a player we've played many pots against so far in this vlog series. Flop comes queen 9-3, and now he donks for $25. And my protocol when players donk into me in a single raise pot heads up in position when they don't use an egregiously large size, I'm just flatting with my entire range because I would like them to continue betting on the turn with a bunch of their weak shit and keep in their bluffs. And then it also looks stronger if they just do happen to have like a 9x or queen x hand here. This guy in particular, when he donks, I've seen him do it with just like top pair almost all the time. He's never donking with like a set or two pair. We start off this hand super deep, like 300 big blinds effective. So maybe just raising on the flop is better and deviating from my protocol here. But I elect to float with just air here on the flop. Turn is a 3 of diamonds, and now he checks. And at this point on the turn, pot is $100. Like I said, I'm pretty sure he has a queen X type holding, hands like queen 10, queen jack, maybe even as strong as king queen. And I don't think those hands are folding even for a big size here on the turn. So I'm gonna go huge here on the turn. I go 225 with the overbet into 100, so 2.25x here on the turn. He thinks and puts in a call. Now the river is an offsuit deuce. This is beautiful. And once again, if I was value betting here on the river, trying to get a hand like queen jack to call, I may go over pot here, but not too egregiously big over pot. I may go like 700, 750 here. So since we are trying to get queen X to fold, we are going to go much bigger than that. He checks, pot is 550. Once again on this river, we are going 2x pot with 8 high. We go 1.1k on the river, and he tanks and tanks and tanks and eventually finds the fold. So really happy with how I played this hand. Getting the extra value on the turn from his queen X, it just isn't folding to a very big size, and then getting that range to fold on the river. Best line in poker, guys, where they call the turn and then fold the river, and we get that extra value by getting greedy on the turn. Next hand here, this is going to be against a future Hungry Horse Poker bootcamp member. He knows who I am, I know who he is, he's watched the videos, but he has not gone through the bootcamp yet, so that's gonna be the villain in this hand. Low jack makes it 20, we look down at pocket Kigglies in the hijack, we make it $60. Small blind cold calls, and now the villain in the big blind is going to cold 4-bet to 250. Everybody else folds back around to us here, and against thinking players like this particular villain here, I just don't have any 5-bets when they 4-bet, because really the only hand that's comfortable jamming at 200 big blinds for value here is a hand like pocket aces. So just really tough to kind of split our range here and have 5-bet jams and have 5-bet bluffs and have 4-bet. So just much easier to simplify and just only have calls to a cold 4-bet. So I'm just going to continue my entire range here as a call. I'm not going to have any 5-bets. Flop comes king 10-5. So we flop top set here, and now he checks. At this point, when he checks on this flop, I think it's unlikely he's got a hand like ace king. He could still have pocket aces sometimes, but I think his most likely holdings are going to be queens and jacks. So we're going to go really small here. You guys have probably seen me do this a few times. Just around 12, 13, 14, 15% pot here, 75 into 575. I want to make sure queens and jacks call at least once. So he does call. Turn is an offsuit deuce. And at this point, again, I'm going to get a little bit greedy. I'm going to try to get one more street here from queens or jacks. If he does have aces here, well, we are just going to get all the money on the river anyway. We are not that deep here. And after putting in another small bet on the turn, we'll only have about 500, 600 behind or something like that. So I think we can get another street against jacks or queens and then get all the money if he does have aces on the river. We go 85, he calls, and now the river is a deuce. So we have top boat, he checks, and we move all in, and now the big blind starts talking.
That's bluff. Is where they call the flop, call the turn, and fold the river. It represent weakness. Yeah, you have queens.
Unfortunately for us, he does just have queens. Don't think we're getting any value from queens on this particular river after getting 2 streets, but we do get a nice 2 streets against queens, and pretty happy overall with how I played this one. This one is a super interesting hand because I really did consider all 3 options on this river. Let's jump in. Cutoff goes 15. We 3-bet on the button with ace king 260, and the cutoff is going to call. Flop comes king jack 10, a triple Broadway board, most notoriously under bluffed board in all of live poker. Cutoff checks. We go $50, just c-betting my entire range here small. He check raises to 120. If he would have gone any bigger than this, I probably just would have folded right here, right now on the flop, but he chose a small size. We've got the backdoor nut flush draw, some options maybe to turn a hand into a bluff, and we think for this small size, he could just have a hand like king queen or sometimes even ace king himself. So we are going to call. Turn is now a 10 of hearts pairing the board, and he goes really small again. He goes 125 here, and we are going to put in the call. Now the river is a 3 of clubs, and he comes out and bets super small again. He goes 165. This to me feels a lot like a hand like queen 9, right? A hand like queen 9 that opens small to 15 and then flopped a straight, but was a little bit worried that he could be behind the nut straight, so he check raised small. And then on the turn was a little bit worried that he could be behind full houses, so bet small. And then on the river, bet small again because he's still just a little bit nervous, but likes his hand, but doesn't want to put a ton of money into the pot. But this is not the player type that I love to bluff, particularly when they've taken a strong line, right? Like even if they're terrified and they say, well, you know, I think you've got kings, but if you got it, you got it. And then they just put in a call, like even if we jam on this river. So I'm not sure this is the guy I want to bluff. Maybe if he was up a lot of money, maybe if he started his hand like 300 big blinds deep, this would be a good spot to bluff. You know what? I don't love calling. I don't love raising. So by process of elimination, I just fold here. But I thought it was a super, super interesting river decision. It could have gone with either of the three options. Big pot alert.
Hello.
We open to 20 from early position with Queen Jack of Hearts, a beautiful hand. Low Jack cutoff and small blind call. So we're 4 ways to a flop, which comes Ace, Queen, 7 with a couple of hearts. We flop middle pair and a heart draw. I don't really see any reason to turn middle pair into a bluff just yet. We are quite happy if this checks through. Thinking we have the best hand a good percentage of the time. So we check and it does check through. Turn is a 9 of spades and it checks to us again. I'm going to check here a second time. I think our hand is a little bit too thin to get 2 streets. Think a player could still have ace X, maybe a weak ace X at some frequency when the flop checks through. Static boards, players do check back top pair, even if it is wet sometimes. So we're going to check. Low Jack goes 55, folds back to us. We've got a decent bluff catcher here. Again, I don't really see any reason to turn second pair into a bluff right now. We are ahead of hands like 10-8, 8-6, Jack 10, etc. So we just have plenty of showdown value here. So we are going to call heads up to a river, which comes at 3 of hearts. This is beautiful. So I'm actually going to check again on the river, giving his bluffs a little bit of rope to fire and giving him the green light to just go ahead and bet when he did turn 2 pair or a set or something like that. So I check. He goes 130 here, which is a very big bet. And like I said, like if he did have like pocket 9s or a hand like 7-9 or queen 9 or something like that here. So I think this is a really bad spot to raise as a bluff. So a great spot to raise for value. So I just put it in. I go all in for 800. He snap calls and he has ace king. So he didn't 3-bet pre-flop. He actually checked back the flop and did expect a lot of ace X, but we were right that he did have a strong hand here. So we win a very, very nice size pot. All right, one of the very few times I have table changed. There were 3 or 4 short stacks at my table and also a couple of pros at my table. So just maybe the worst 5-5 table I've ever played at. So I actually requested table change for I think maybe only the first or second time. So we haven't got a good seat yet. This is a bad seat for filming. I will move very, very soon. But in this hand, I opened to $20 with ace king from under the gun. Button 3 bets to 60 and he's only started the hand at about 400 effective. So I'm just gonna put the money in here and flop comes 10-7 deuce. Not great for us. And turn is a queen, river is a jack. Look at that, we flopped it. We flopped it here and we flip it over and we are good against pocket 10s, which flopped a set actually. So we win a nice little pot. All right, so I've changed my MO here and if I am against players who are playing for profit, I'm just not gonna chop in the blinds. Now, I know this is going to hurt me. Like, I know this is not profitable, but I don't want these guys to play at my table. I just want them to try to table change. I don't table change usually as a general rule. I know I did this session. It's an exception, not the rule. And I just don't want these guys to play at the same table as me. This one, it actually folds around to me in the small blind, and I'm not sure if this guy is a pro or not. So I asked him where he's from.
Where are you from? From New York? From what? New York. Europe? New York. New York? Yeah. Okay, we can chop.
Well, he's from New York, so I guess we can chop it. If he said he was from Europe or Brazil or Japan, we weren't chopping. Next hand, these straddles on, so we're playing 5-5-10. We opened to $40 from early position with queen jack. The big blind and straddle call, 3 ways, so we're in position. King, queen, 3, we've got kind of a showdown value, maybe thin value hand if it checks through. So we're just going to check this back, not getting 3 streets with this one. Turn is a 10 of hearts, bringing in a backdoor flush draw, so triple Broadway board now. Big blind checks, straddle comes out and bets 55. We've got middle pair and an open and straight draw, so we're going to call. Now the big blind's going to call as well. River is an ace, and at this point, the big blind checks and the straddle checks. So I think it's possible that the big blind could still have a jack at some frequency, but I don't think the straddle ever has a jack. I think the straddle is going to have a lot of 2 pair here on this river. So if we were trying to make the straddle fold 2 pair, what size would we go? I think we'd have to go really big here, maybe like 425, 450. So I actually think we can go relatively big for value and get 2 pair to call here. So I go 350 into 285. Now the big blind calls. So I think the big blind is just gonna have a jack at a high frequency. Straddle folds. We show our hand and big blind mucks. And he says he actually had a set here. So I'm not sure how he had a set and he just check called on the turn. I don't know what he had, but we get some nice value on this river. Next hand, I'm opening blind on the button. Once again, the big blind calls, and we look down a queen 3 this time, so a little bit better than the 8 deuce and 8 threes we've had so far this session. Flop comes king 10 6 with a couple of hearts. He checks it over. I'm just going to be c-betting half pot here with my entire range. He calls. Turn is now a jack, so we turn open-ended here, and he says, I just think he's going to have a lot of hands here on this turn that are going to be relatively sticky and hang on for one more bet and then fold a lot on the river. He's going to have a lot of heart draw. He's going to have a pair plus flush draws, pair plus straight draws. So I'm going to size up here. I go 140, and now the big blind starts talking.
You're gonna have to go all in and kick me out. What is that? Housing? I think I got the best hand, but what are you gonna do on the river?
Depends on the river card.
I'm pretty sure I got the best hand.
If it's a deuce of clubs, I'm gonna bet like 700 probably. If it's a heart, I gotta decide.
So eventually, after all the talk, big blind does fold here, and he eventually says that he had a king. So he actually folded a king on the turn. We'll take it. Like ideally, we want the king to call turn and then fold river, but you know what? We'll take getting top pair to fold anytime when we have queen high. Next hand here, straddle's on. We're playing 1 round of straddle. It folds around to the small blind, who makes it $30. We're in the big blind with ace 10 off and in a wide versus wide configuration, especially because the small blind only starts this hand about 500 to 600 effective, so only 55, 60 big blinds deep here. We are going to 3-bet the offsuit ace. We would like to shut out the straddle here. The offsuit kind of ace 10, ace jack, king queen off type hands play better when shallow than they do when deep. So we 3-bet to $90 and only the small blind calls. Heads up to a flop, which is really good for us. 10-4 deuce. He checks it over and we go half pot here, $90, expecting him to be relatively inelastic if he does have like 2 big overs like ace queen or ace jack suited or something like that. I think those are going to call one time. And obviously he's not folding any pairs like pocket 8s, pocket 9s, pocket 6s, whatever. So we go 90, he calls, and now the turn is a pretty good card for us. It's a 4 of hearts, and he checks it over, and I think there's 2 options here. We could just jam. I was kind of trying to play a 2-street game. He's only got about 325 back here. Pot is 365, so we could just jam here, but I think if we just go really, really small, we can still just encourage floats again. So I'm gonna get a little bit tricky here. I go 125, he calls. River is a 5. At this point, he's got less than 200 behind, so I say,
I would like to play for all of the dollars. If you had 8s, I would call. If you had 9s, I would fold. Queens are good.
we show immediately, and we are good. Next hand here, cutoff makes it 20, button calls. We look down an ace king in the small blind. We are going to squeeze. We go 115. The cutoff tanks and tanks and tanks. I can tell like he's really torn between his decision. This is actually genuine. He's not just Hollywooding here. This seems genuine to me. He jams all in for 550. Obviously, we have an easy decision. We snap it off. Flop comes 6-5-3 with 3 hearts. We've got the ace of hearts in our hand, so we're going to need a heart, but unfortunately, the turn is a blank. I don't know what it is. River is a blank. It may as well be 2 jokers, and our ace king is not good, and cutoff says he has pocket 10s here, and we lose the flip, unfortunately. All right, guys, session wrap up. It's the next day. I was too tired to do this last night. Pretty good session overall. Played about 11 hours, won about $1,800 and some change. So pretty successful session. And overall, Marco can put the results over here. Marco, this is for you. Just put them right here. Making about 110 bucks an hour and played about 164, 165 hours. So we are on pace so far. See you guys soon. Have a gentle day.